The Thames was a slab of liquid iron cold and heavy, reflecting the bruised gray of a London October sky. On the Millennium Bridge, the air didn't just chill, it vibrated. For a fleeting second, the mundane roar of the city, the distant traffic, the murmur of tourists. The wind was silenced by a sound like tearing silk. A circular gateway burned into existence, its edges spitting golden sparks that hissed as they met the damp English air, dissipating instantly into mist. Stephen Strange stepped through the portal, his boots hitting the metal grating of the bridge, with a heavy, purposeful thud. Behind him, the gateway collapsed in on itself, vanishing as if the universe were stitching a wound closed. He stood motionless for a moment, the high color of the cloak of levitation shifting slightly in the wind. Around him, the London crowd flowed like a river around a stone. Tourists blinked their eyes, sliding off him, their minds already editing out the impossible arrival they had just witnessed. Strange noted the phenomenon with a detached professional interest. Minor perception spells appeared to be a universal, constant, effective even across dimensional barriers. But he wasn't here to admire the local concealment charms. He was here because of an infection. For 3 weeks, the eye of Agamotto had burned against his chest during his deepest meditations. It wasn't a warning of invasion or a summon from a demon lord. It was a diagnostic. The eye had shown him a vision repetitive and nausea-inducing, a soul not merely damaged, but fractured, smashed into pieces like a dropped mirror, with each jagged fragment anchored to a physical object scattered across this island nation. Strange had studied possession. He had read the texts on spiritual decay. This was neither. This was deliberate, surgical, an abomination against the fundamental laws of life and death that resonated across dimensional barriers like a scream in a quiet room. The Ancient One had taught him that some magical violations were so profound, so perversely wrong, that they created ripples through the multiverse. Standing on the bridge, Strange closed his eyes and let his consciousness expand. He didn't just look, he felt. The mystical energy signature of London hit him like a physical wave. It was overwhelming. In New York, the magic hummed a background radiation of ley lines and ambient energy. Here it roared. It felt concentrated, almost pressurized, as if someone had taken the natural, chaotic magic of the entire British Isles and forced it through a funnel. It was structured, intentional, and utterly alien to the systems he had mastered at Camartage. And beneath that structured hum, he felt the rot. It pulsed from the south and slightly to the east, a deep, cancerous wrongness, a fragment of a shattered soul beating with a dark, rhythmic intent. Strange opened his eyes, the steel in his gaze sharpened. With a gesture of practiced precision, the cloak of levitation engaged, lifting him smoothly off the bridge surface. A few pedestrians glanced up, squinting at the sky, their brains frantically categorizing the flying silhouette as a large bird or a trick of the light, or simply nothing at all. He flew low and fast, a streak of blue and red, cutting through the gloom, following the gray artery of the Thames toward the heart of the city. His astral senses locked onto the corruption signature, tracking the scent of the broken soul. The trail pulled him away from the river, twisting through streets that seemed to oscillate between the modern steel of London and something older, something hidden in the creases of the city. He began to feel the barriers, perception filters, spatial distortions. Entire city blocks folded away from normal sight like origami. It was sophisticated magic, certainly, but compared to the mirror dimension manipulation he dealt with daily, it felt crude. Whoever these practitioners were, they had prioritized hiding over the mastery of dimensional geometry. Strange touched down in a narrow, grime-streaked alley sandwiched between a record shop and a pub. To the naked eye, it was a dead end, but when Strange engaged his third eye, the mystical sight that pierced illusions, the brick wall in front of him dissolved into transparency. He saw a layer of reality that existed in the interstitial space between the mundane buildings. The magical signature spiked here intense and vibrant. Dozens of human presences radiated their own smaller magical fields, bustling about in a pocket dimension that shouldn't exist. He stepped forward. He didn't cast a counterspell. He simply walked through the barrier as easily as passing through an open door. The world shifted instantly. The gray silence of London was replaced by a riot of color and noise. Diagon alleys sprawled before him in all its impossible, crooked glory. Buildings leaned over the cobblestones at angles that made a mockery of physics, held up by nothing but stubbornness and spells. Strange's analytical mind began cataloging the data immediately. The architecture was medieval, preserved in a magical stasis. There was a complete absence of modern technology, no electricity, no digital signals, nothing. And the people, wizards in robes, hurried past, clutching parchment and strange ingredients, completely ignoring the man in the blue tunic and high-collared cloak standing at the entrance. Strange watched them closely. Every single practitioner carried a wooden stick. They clutched them like lifelines. A focus, he realized. They were channeling their internal magic through prepared instruments rather than manipulating the energy directly. It was fascinating, but it was also a crutch. It was limiting. He drifted deeper into the alley. To his left, a dusty shop window displayed a single wand on a faded cushion. The gold letters above the door read, "Ollivander's makers of fine wands since 382 BC. Through the warped glass, Strange watched a ritual unfold. An elderly man with wild white hair was presenting wooden sticks to a young child. The boy waved one and nothing happened. He waved another and a vase shattered. The third stick, however, produced a fountain of red and gold sparks when the boy's fingers closed around it. The parents gasped in delight, clapping as if they were witnessing a miracle. Strange frowned. They were choosing tools. These wizards couldn't access their own power without these external objects. Or perhaps more tragically, they had never been taught that they could. It explained the feel of the magic in this dimension, rigid, traditional, powerful, yes, but constrained by self-imposed limitations. He moved on, drawing occasional curious glances now. His clothing marked him as foreign, but in a street full of eccentric robes he wasn't immediately identified as a threat. That was good. He needed information before he revealed the full extent of his capabilities. The dark soul fragment pulsed again in his awareness. Stronger this time. It was here, somewhere in this hidden magical district, or at least the trail led through here. One piece of 7. No, his mystical senses corrected him sharp and cold. 8. 8 fragments, though one felt different, softer, accidental. Someone had murdered their way to immortality, shattering their soul, again and again, to anchor pieces of themselves to the living world. And in doing so, they had created a temporal paradox, a localized cancer that threatened the stability of this entire dimensional reality. Strange stopped in the middle of the cobblestone street. He needed to understand the metaphysics of this place. The magic here operated on different principles than the mystic arts. Different rules meant different consequences. If he simply collected the fragments and destroyed them with cosmic energy, he might destabilize the framework that sustained them, causing a catastrophic collapse. He needed a teacher, or at least an expert who wrote things down. A sign swung above his head, creaking in the wind, flourish and blots. Perfect. Strange pushed open the door, a small bell chiming to announce his arrival. The scent washed over him instantly, old parchment binding, glue, and ink. It was a smell that transcended dimensions. Familiar, grounding. Whatever else was different about this chaotic, stick-waving world, books remained constant. He moved through the aisles with efficient speed, bypassing the sections on household charms and basic hexes, heading straight for the shelves labeled Advanced Magical Theory. He pulled a thick leather-bound tome from the shelf. The darkest art, then another, Magic Most Evil, and a third on the history of the last 50 years. He began to read. He didn't read like a human. He didn't scan lines. He absorbed pages. His eidetic memory took snapshots of the text, processing the information, instantly cross-referencing it with everything he knew of multiversal theory. Within an hour, he had constructed a working model of this world's magical system. Wand-based spellcasting, structured incantations mostly Latin-derived, a bureaucratic government called the Ministry of Magic that governed this hidden society with an obsession for secrecy, a strict, almost xenophobic separation between magical and non-magical humans. And most intriguingly, the recent political climate. The books and the newspapers stacked near the counter spoke of a dark wizard named Voldemort. The Daily Prophet, the local newspaper, vehemently denied his return, painting anyone who claimed otherwise as a fearmonger. Strange looked at the date on the newspaper, October 15th, 1995. Voldemort, the fractured soul. It wasn't a coincidence. Strange closed the book on Horcruxes, a term he had just learned, a nasty little piece of soul magic, forbidden in every respectable mystical tradition, and looked up. He wasn't alone. Peering at him from behind a towering stack of advanced arithmancy texts was a young woman. She had bushy brown hair that seemed to have a life of its own, and she was watching him with an intensity that bordered on forensic. She couldn't have been more than 15, but her eyes, they held a sharp, burning intelligence, the look of someone who noticed inconsistencies in the world and couldn't rest until they were categorized. "You're reading without moving your lips," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor of curiosity beneath it. "And you've gone through 6 books in an hour." Strange held her gaze. He didn't speak immediately. Also, she continued, stepping out from behind her fortress of books. "You're not using a wand, but I can feel magic around you. Different magic." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed his strange blue tunic. "Who are you?" Strange smiled. It was a small, genuine expression. He recognized that look. It was the look of a mind that refused to be dull. "Brilliant minds recognize each other across any universe," he said softly. "I'm someone investigating an anomaly." He placed the book on the table between them. "And I believe you might be able to help me understand the situation here," Strange said. "Tell me, what do you know about souls being split apart?" The girl's eyes widened. The intellectual curiosity vanished, replaced instantly by a dawn of recognition and horror. "Hermione Granger, she said, introducing herself automatically, though her mind was clearly racing. She looked at the book under his hand, then back at his face. If you're asking about that, we need to go to Professor Dumbledore. Immediately. Hermione Granger prided herself on logic. The world, magical or otherwise, was a series of systems. Learn the rules, master the inputs, and the outputs became predictable. That was safety. That was order. But as she walked briskly through the darkening streets of Islington, with the stranger in the blue tunic, her systems were failing. She had tried to explain the Floo network, the network of interconnected fireplaces, used for magical transport. The man, Dr. Strange, had looked at the green powder in her hand with the polite condescension one might offer a child explaining how a mud pie works. He had simply gestured and the air had folded, depositing them blocks away from their destination without a sound. No soot, no spinning, just a tear in the fabric of space that he stepped through as if it were a curtain. "We're here," Hermione said, her breath hitching slightly. She stopped in front of a row of grimy townhouses. Number 12, Grimmauld Place. It's unplottable, protected by a Fidelius charm. You won't be able to see it unless I read the vibrational frequency of the spatial fold, Strange interrupted. He didn't wait for the piece of parchment she was fumbling to retrieve from her pocket. He simply looked at the space between numbers 11 and 13. His eyes, keen and terrifyingly sharp, narrowed. "Interesting," he murmured. "You've taken a pocket of dimension and anchored it to a specific secret keeper's consciousness, a cognitive barrier rather than a physical one." He raised a hand. He didn't cast a spell. He simply acknowledged the hidden space. With a groan of shifting brick and mortar that sounded like a giant cracking its knuckles, the building squeezed into existence. The neighboring houses were shoved aside, expanding the street to accommodate the dark, unwelcoming facade of number 12. Hermione stared. He hadn't been given the secret. He had just looked at the lock and decided it was open. "After you, Miss Granger," Strange said. They ascended the stone steps. The door swung open before Hermione could knock, revealing a hallway that smelled of damp, rot old dust and centuries of pure-blood paranoia. Standing at the end of the hall, framed by the peeling wallpaper and the shadows of troll-leg umbrella stands, was Albus Dumbledore. Hermione felt a wave of relief crash over her. Dumbledore would handle this. Dumbledore was the apex. The headmaster wore midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars, and his half-moon spectacles caught the dim light of the gas lamps. He radiated a power that usually made the air hum, a comforting grandfatherly warmth. But today, for the first time, Hermione felt something else. As Strange stepped across the threshold, the air in the hallway changed. It grew heavy. Static charge pricked at Hermione's skin. It was the sensation of two storm fronts colliding. "Dr. Stephen Strange," Dumbledore said softly. It wasn't a question. His voice was calm, but his eyes, usually twinkling with amusement, were deadly serious. "Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, protector of your dimension against mystical threats." Strange stopped. The cloak of levitation settled around his shoulders, the high collar framing his face like a royal mantle. "You're well informed," Strange replied, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow hall. "For the leader of a society that hides in the dark. Knowledge and isolation are not mutually exclusive," Dumbledore said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the dining room. "Please, come in. We have much to discuss, and I suspect very little time." Hermione hesitated. The adult thing to do would be to send her upstairs, to shield her. But she stepped into the dining room behind them, clutching her book bag. Neither wizard stopped her. The dining room was a cavern of shadows. Strange and Dumbledore took seats at the long, scarred wooden table, sitting opposite each other like kings of opposing nations. Strange didn't waste time with pleasantries. He leaned forward and Hermione saw the heavy amulet around his neck. The eye of Agamotto opened slightly. A green light pulsed from within. "I see layers on you," Strange said, his gaze dissecting the headmaster. "Protective enchantments, detection webs, and something else. Time bends around you. You exist slightly outside the normal flow of causality." Dumbledore glanced at the amulet. "The eye of Agamotto," he murmured. "We have time turners, of course, but they are crude mechanical toys compared to what hangs around your neck. Toys regulated by bureaucrats." Strange shot back. "I've seen your ministry. I've sensed the rot. But I didn't come here to discuss your government's incompetence." Strange placed his hands on the table. The wood seemed to groan under the weight of his intent. "I came because of the wound, a soul fractured into 8 pieces, an abomination so profound it is creating temporal instability in my reality. Your dark wizard, Voldemort." Hermione flinched at the name. Dumbledore didn't. "You know about Horcruxes?" Dumbledore said the word heavy as a stone dropping into a well. "I know soul magic," Strange corrected. "The specific term is irrelevant. The principle is universal and forbidden. Murder used to split the spirit, an object used to anchor the fragment. It is a violation of the natural order." Strange's voice dropped, becoming colder, sharper. "What I don't understand, Headmaster, is why you are allowing it to continue." Hermione's breath caught. No one spoke to Dumbledore like this. "You know he's returned," Strange pressed. "You've known for months, yet your government denies it. A sadist is torturing students in your own school, and you sit here in the dark." "I am gathering information," Dumbledore said, his voice level. "I am positioning pieces." "Pieces?" Strange's eyebrows shot up. "You're treating this like a chess match." "I am treating it like a war," Dumbledore countered, a flash of steel finally showing through the grandfatherly facade. "A war I have been fighting for 50 years. Voldemort is immortal as long as his Horcruxes exist. We must find them. We must destroy them. We strike too soon. He vanishes and the darkness lingers forever." "So you let the infection spread?" Strange challenged. "You let a 15-year-old boy carry the weight of a prophecy while you wait for the perfect moment." Hermione froze. Prophecy. She looked from Strange to Dumbledore. The headmaster looked tired suddenly, ancient. "You have seen the prophecy then," Dumbledore said quietly. "I know how prophecies work," Strange said. "They are echoes of possible futures. They bind people. Self-fulfilling loops." "Harry Potter is marked," Dumbledore said. "He is the key, but he is a child. Should I burden him with the knowledge that he must either kill or be killed? Should I weaponize him before he is ready?" "You're protecting him from the truth, not the danger," Strange said. "And in doing so, you're leaving him defenseless." "I am doing what must be done for the greater good," Dumbledore said. The air in the room temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. Strange recoiled as if Dumbledore had slapped him. His eyes, previously analytical, burned with a sudden personal fury. "The greater good," Strange repeated, tasting the words like poison. He stood up. The cloak of levitation billowed behind him, restless and agitated. "I've known men who used that phrase, Albus Strange, said his voice low and dangerous. "I've known sorcerers who justified the darkest acts imaginable because they thought they were the only ones who could see the big picture. They usually end up becoming the very monsters they claimed to fight." Dumbledore looked down at his hands, one of which was blackened and withered. Hermione noticed with a start. He looked up, and for a moment the twinkle was gone entirely. Only infinite sadness remained. "I have known such men as well," Dumbledore whispered. "Indeed, I was nearly one of them myself." The silence that followed was suffocating. Hermione pressed herself against the wall, wishing she were invisible. She was witnessing a collision of philosophies that terrified her. Dumbledore believed in the long game, in secrets, in sacrificing the pawn to save the king. Strange believed in the scalpel, cut the rot out whatever the immediate cost, but never lie about the surgery. So Strange said, breaking the silence, "What do you want from me? If I'm just another chaotic variable in your chess game, tell me now." "I want to know if you are an ally," Dumbledore said. "I am not your ally," Strange said, "and I am not your soldier. I am the Sorcerer Supreme. I answer to the safeguarding of reality." He leaned over the table. "If I see children in danger, I act. If I see a way to end this war, I take it. You don't have to like my methods, Headmaster, but you will not stop them." Dumbledore studied him for a long, agonizing moment. Then slowly the ghost of a smile returned to his lips. "I suspected as much," Dumbledore said. "Very well, Dr. Strange. I will share what I know of the Horcruxes. In return, I ask that you do not break my world before you save it." Deal, Strange said. "I need access to Hogwarts. The primary corruption signature is there." Agreed, Dumbledore nodded. "Though I must warn you, the school is currently under the thumb of the Ministry, a woman named Dolores Umbridge." Strange allowed a thin, predatory smile to cross his face. "The bureaucrat," he asked. "The one denying the war." "The very same," Dumbledore said, eyes twinkling again. "I suspect watching her encounter a wizard she cannot regulate will be quite entertaining." The transition to Hogwarts was instantaneous. One moment the gloom of London, the next the crisp, biting air of the Scottish Highlands. Strange stood at the edge of the Black Lake. The castle rose before them, a sprawling, impossible geometry of towers and turrets, silhouetted against the night sky. To Hermione, it was home. It was warm fires and library books. To Strange, it was a fortress of intent. Impressive Strange admitted, scanning the structure. The castle isn't just built, it's woven. Protective wards layered like sediment, 1,000 years of reinforced magic. "The Founder's magic," Dumbledore said, appearing beside him. They walked up the sloping grounds. Hermione trailed behind her mind, reeling. Horcruxes, soul fragments, the greater good. Her world of rules and textbooks was cracking. Magic wasn't just spells and wands. It was this terrifying negotiation of reality between two men who wielded power she couldn't even comprehend. As they reached the massive oak front doors, they swung open. Standing there was Professor McGonagall, looking stern in emerald robes. Her lips were a thin line of disapproval as she took in Strange's attire. "Albus," she clipped, "you're late. And who is this?" Professor Minerva McGonagall Dumbledore introduced smoothly. "This is Dr. Strange, a visiting consultant." McGonagall's eyes narrowed at Strange's empty hands. "He has no wand." "I don't need one," Strange said calmly. He looked around the entrance hall, his eyes glowing faintly as he used his sight. Your transfiguration work on the structural supports is elegant, Professor. You fundamentally reorganized the matter of the castle to support weight it shouldn't physically bear. Remarkable. McGonagall blinked, her stern demeanor faltering for a split second. A compliment on her technical application of magic was the quickest way to her heart. Well, yes, thank you. Before the pleasantries could continue, a sound cut through the air, a high-pitched girlish hem-hem. Strange turned slowly. Descending the marble staircase was a woman who looked like a large pale toad wrapped in a fuzzy pink cardigan. She was smiling, but the smile didn't reach her bulging, watery eyes. Hermione felt her stomach drop. Dolores Umbridge, the High Inquisitor, the woman who had made Hogwarts a prison of decrees and educational restrictions. Umbridge stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes flicking over Strange with profound distaste. "Headmaster," she said, her voice sugary, sweet, and dripping with poison, "I was not informed of visitors. As High Inquisitor, surely you are aware that Educational Decree number 26 requires all guests to be submitted for approval." She stepped closer to Strange, looking him up and down. And this man, she sniffed. No badge, no ministry clearance. Who are you? Strange looked at her. He didn't look angry. He looked at her the way a scientist looks at a particularly fascinating yet repulsive mold culture. "I'm the solution," Strange said. "Excuse me," Umbridge bristled, her pink cardigan seemingly puffing up. "I demand to see your wand registration immediately." No, Strange said. The silence that followed was absolute. Hermione stopped breathing. "You didn't say no to Umbridge. Not without detention, not without scars." "I beg your pardon," Umbridge sputtered. "I said no." Strange repeated, his voice bored. "I don't have a wand registration. I'm not in your system, and I don't answer to you." Umbridge's face turned a violent shade of violet. She fumbled for her stubby wand. "I will have order," she shrieked. "You are trespassing, I will." She raised her wand. Strange didn't move his feet. He simply raised his left hand. Golden sparks erupted from his fingertips, spinning instantly into complex, rotating geometric mandalas of hard light. The runes whirred and clicked, forming a translucent shield that hung in the air between them, humming with enough raw power to light up the entire hall. The students watching from the balconies gasped. Hermione's hands flew to her mouth. This wasn't a Protego, this was pure energy, structured, beautiful, terrifying. "I understand you teach a theory-only curriculum," Strange said, his voice cutting through the hum of the shield. "No practical application, no defense, just silence." He lowered the shield, letting the golden construct dissolve into mist that drifted over Umbridge's stunned face. "That ends today." The encounter in the entrance hall had been brief, violent, and utterly silent. The repercussions, however, were deafening. As Strange turned his back on a paralyzed Dolores Umbridge and began ascending the marble staircase, the whispers started. They spread like wildfire through the student body, hanging over the banisters, a mix of awe and terrified delight. Someone had finally said no. Hermione hurried to keep pace with Dumbledore and Strange. Her mind was a frantic whir of calculations. She had spent 5 years memorizing the laws of magic. Gamp's Law of Elemental Transfiguration, the standard Book of Spells grades 1 through 5, the absolute necessity of wand movements and precise incantations, swish and flick, Wingardium Leviosa. And this man, this Dr. Strange, had just dismissed it all with a wave of his hand. That was unwise, McGonagall said, her voice tight as she walked beside them. Satisfying, undoubtedly, but unwise. She has the minister's ear. She will return with horrors. Let them come. Strange said, not slowing down. Your ministry is fighting a war against the truth. I don't have time to fill out their forms. He reached the landing and stopped, looking out over the moving staircases. The portraits on the walls gasped and pointed as he floated slightly above the floor steps, compensating for the shifting stone without even looking down. Your system is flawed, Strange stated, addressing Dumbledore but looking at Hermione. I've watched your students. They treat magic like a recipe. Add A to B to get C. It's rigid. It's fragile. It is structured, Hermione found herself saying, her voice trembling slightly. Structure prevents accidents. It keeps magic safe. Strange turned his gaze on her. It felt like being examined by a microscope. Safety is an illusion, Miss Granger, he said softly. You learn specific defenses for specific attacks. Protego blocks minor hexes. Expecto Patronum repels Dementors. But what happens when you face something you haven't memorized a counter for? What happens when the enemy changes the rules? We adapt, Hermione said, though she felt less certain than she sounded. Do you, Strange challenged, or do you freeze because the answer isn't in a book? He turned back to the corridor. The mystic arts teach principles, not recipes. Energy manipulation, dimensional awareness, universal constants. If you understand the nature of reality, you don't need a specific spell to change it. You just change it. Hermione opened her mouth to argue, to cite the risks of uncontrolled magic, but Strange stopped dead. His hand went to the eye of Agamotto. The golden lattice of the amulet whirred, the sound sharp and mechanical in the quiet corridor. It's here, Strange whispered. Dumbledore stopped. Doctor? The signal, Strange said, his eyes scanning the stone walls as if they were made of glass. I felt it in London, but here, it's screaming. He turned slowly, facing a blank stretch of wall opposite a tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, attempting to teach trolls ballet. One of the soul fragments, Strange said, his voice hard. A Horcrux. It's in this castle. Hermione felt the blood drain from her face. Inside Hogwarts with the students. It's been here for decades, Strange murmured. He walked toward the wall, his hand outstretched. Ancient magic, hidden deep. The room of requirement. The come-and-go room. Dumbledore noted his expression darkening. Voldemort would be arrogant enough to believe he was the only one who discovered it. Strange closed his eyes. It's cluttered. Millions of objects, lost things, hidden things, and buried beneath centuries of junk. A diadem, corrupted, rotting. Ravenclaw's diadem, Hermione breathed. The lost diadem, it's a myth. It's a cancer, Strange corrected, and we are going to cut it out. He turned to Dumbledore. But not yet. If we destroy it now, Voldemort feels it. He knows we're hunting him. We lose the element of surprise before we've secured the other targets. Agreed, Dumbledore said. We mark it, we wait. In the meantime, Strange said, turning his gaze to the end of the corridor where a group of students had just rounded the corner. I have a class to teach. Standing there, looking stunned to see the headmaster and the strange visitor, were Harry Potter and Ron Weasley. Harry looked tired, his hair messy, his eyes wary. The lightning bolt scar stood out starkly against his pale skin. Harry Dumbledore said warmly, "Perfect timing." The room of requirement had accommodated Dumbledore's army before providing cushions, bookshelves, and target dummies. But under Strange's influence, it transformed into something far more clinical and vast. The floor became a grid of black polished stone. The ceiling vanished, replaced by a swirling nebulas of deep space, an illusion Hermione knew, but it felt terrifyingly real. There were no cushions, no comfort, just open, unforgiving space. 30 students stood in the center, looking around nervously. The core of the DA, Harry, Ron, Ginny, Neville. Luna, the Weasley twins, were at the front. But word had spread after the scene in the entrance hall. Others had snuck in. Skeptics, the curious, the desperate. Strange stood at the head of the room. He had removed his heavy cloak, letting it hover in the corner like a sentient sentinel. He wore only his blue tunic, his arms bare, revealing scars on his hands that looked like spider webs of old pain. "Right, Strange," began his voice, carrying without a sonorous charm. "First question. Who can tell me what magic actually is?" Hermione's hand shot up. It was a reflex. She couldn't help it. Strange nodded to her. "Magic is the ability to manipulate reality through focused intent and proper spell work," Hermione recited, quoting the standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, channeled through a wand using specific incantations and wand movements based on centuries of refined technique. Textbook Strange said it wasn't a compliment and entirely wrong. Hermione blinked, stung. "But that's what the ministry determines." "I asked what magic is," Strange interrupted gently, "not how your government regulates it." He began to pace his boots, clicking on the black stone. "Magic is the background radiation of the multiverse. It flows through every atom, every dimension, every second of time. It is the source code of reality." He raised his shaking hands. Orange sparks ignited, spinning into a complex fiery whip that cracked through the air, illuminating the faces of the students. "Your wands," Strange said, dismissing the whip into a shower of embers. "They are crutches. They are focusing tools, yes, but you have become dependent on them. You believe the magic comes from the stick. It doesn't." He stopped in front of Neville Longbottom, who looked like he wanted to merge with the floor. "It comes from you," Strange said, "from your will, your connection to the energy around you." "But we can't do magic without wands," Zacharias Smith sneered from the back. "That's impossible." Strange looked at him. "It's only impossible because you've been told it is. It is a self-fulfilling limitation." He turned back to the group. "Tonight we are not learning spells. We are not waving sticks. We are learning to see." "See what Ron whispered to Harry." "Everything Strange said. Close your eyes." The students hesitated. Harry was the first to comply, squeezing his eyes shut. Slowly, the others followed. Hermione fought the urge to keep hers open, to analyze, to watch. But she forced her eyelids down. "Magic has a signature." Strange's voice drifted through the room. "A texture. You feel it when you cast a powerful spell, that vibration in your arm that is the energy passing through you. I want you to feel the room, not with your skin, with your mind." Hermione stood in the darkness of her own head. She tried to think. What am I looking for? What are the parameters? "Stop thinking." Miss Granger Strange's voice was right beside her ear. She flinched. "You are analyzing. You are trying to categorize the sensation before you've even felt it." Let go of the logic. Logic is a tool for understanding the structure, not the energy. I don't know how, she whispered, frustration welling up. Breathe, Strange commanded. Suddenly, Hermione felt a pulse. It wasn't a sound. It was a ripple in the air, like a bass note played on a piano made of light. It washed over her, raising the hairs on her arms. That, Strange said to the room, is a minor energy pulse now. Reach out, find the source. For 20 minutes he guided them. It was exhausting. It was frustrating. It was nothing like any class Hermione had ever taken. There were no quills, no notes, just this raw, uncomfortable intimacy with the air around them. I feel it, Luna Lovegood said dreamily. It tickles like rack spurts, but warmer. It's heavy, Harry murmured, like the air before a thunderstorm. Good, Strange said. Hold that. Expand it. Then the door to the room of requirement exploded. It didn't just open, it was blasted off its hinges. Splinters of wood showered the black stone floor. Hermione's eyes snapped open. Dolores Umbridge stood in the jagged opening, flanked by her inquisitorial squad, Draco Malfoy, Crabbe Goyle, and 2 large, grim-faced Aurors. I knew it, Umbridge shrieked, her face flushed with triumph. An illegal gathering. Educational Decree number 24 clearly states that all student organizations are disbanded. She stepped into the room, her wand raised. The students scattered, terrified. Harry reached for his wand. Don't, Strange said. He didn't shout. He didn't even turn around initially. Umbridge pointed her wand at Strange's back. You are under arrest for trespassing, inciting rebellion, and teaching unauthorized magic. Aurors seize him. The 2 Aurors stepped forward, wands raised. Strange turned. He looked at the shattered door. He looked at the fear on Neville's face. He looked at the smug grin on Draco Malfoy's lips. I am in the middle of a lesson, Strange said. His voice was dangerously calm. And I hate interruptions. Seize him, Umbridge screamed. Stupefy, one of the Aurors shouted. A jet of red light shot toward Strange. Strange didn't dodge. He simply twisted his wrist. The red light hit an invisible barrier a foot from his chest and vanished. It wasn't blocked. It was absorbed. That, Strange said to the class, ignoring the attackers, is absorption, redirecting energy rather than opposing it. Get him, Umbridge yelled, firing a stunning spell herself. Strange sighed. He raised both hands, and the room shifted. The black stone floor rippled like water. The shattered doorframe groaned and grew, the wood twisting and knitting itself back together. But it didn't stop there. Strange thrust his hands outward. A wave of golden mirror dimension glass erupted from the floor, forming a perfect crystalline box around Umbridge, the Aurors, and the squad. They pounded on the glass, shouting, but no sound came out. Their spells bounced harmlessly off the interior, illuminating their panicked faces in flashes of red and green. Class is not dismissed, Strange said, turning his back on the trapped officials. As I was saying, focus requires isolation. He gestured, and the crystal box and everyone inside it slid backward, pushed by invisible hands, until they were deposited outside the room. Strange clamped his hands together. The door slammed shut. Golden runes, complex and burning with eldritch power, seared themselves into the wood, locking it with a seal that no Alohomora in existence could break. Now, Strange said, facing the stunned students. Eyes closed again. I want you to sense the residual magic of that shield spell. Feel how it differs from the stunning spells they cast. Taste the difference between defensive structure and offensive projection. Bloody hell, Ron whispered, his eyes wide. "Focus," Mr. Weasley Strange commanded. The lesson ended an hour later. The students filed out exhausted but electric with excitement. They had touched something real tonight. They hadn't just waved wands, they had felt the pulse of the world. Potter, Granger, Weasley Strange called out as the room emptied, "Stay." Hermione stopped her heart hammering. She waited until the door closed behind the last student, Luna, who gave Strange a polite curtsy before leaving. Strange stood in the center of the vast room. He looked tired now. Using magic in this dimension, Hermione realized, took a toll on him. It was like running underwater. "You have questions," Strange said. "You just attacked ministry officials," Hermione said, her voice high. "They'll come back with the entire Auror office. You've started a war." "The war started 15 years ago," Strange said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening." He walked over to them. Up close, Hermione saw the gray at his temples, the lines of stress around his eyes. He looked like a man carrying the weight of multiple worlds. "I kept you back because you three are the center of this," Strange said. "Prophecy has its own gravity, and you are caught in the pull." "You know about the prophecy?" Harry asked, stepping forward. "About me and Voldemort." "I know it binds you," Strange said. "Neither can live while the other survives. A binary outcome, efficient, brutal." He looked at Harry with a mixture of pity and professional assessment. "But killing Voldemort isn't just about winning a duel, Harry. You know this. Dumbledore has told you." "The Horcruxes," Harry said. "We have to find them." "We have found one," Strange said. The three teenagers froze. Tonight, Strange continued. "When we were walking in the corridor, I felt it. The signal is unmistakable to someone who knows what to look for." "Where?" Harry demanded. "Here," Strange said. "In this room." He pointed to a distant corner of the Room of Requirement, where mountains of discarded furniture and centuries of hidden contraband were piled high into teetering towers. "Buried in that junk," Strange said, "Ravenclaw's diadem, a piece of his soul sitting here festering in the heart of the school." "We have to destroy it," Ron said, reaching for his wand. "Now, let's smash it." No, Strange's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down, Mr. Weasley." Ron sat looking startled. "Listen to me closely," Strange said, his eyes boring into them. "This isn't a game of hide and seek. These objects are anchored to his life force. When we destroy one, he will know. He will feel the pain, and he will realize we know his secret." "So we lose the element of surprise," Hermione realized. "Once we break the first one, he'll move the others. He'll fortify them." "Exactly," Strange nodded. "Which is why we do not strike until we are ready to finish it. We need to locate the others first. We need a map before we start the fire." He looked at Harry. "Dumbledore wants to play this slowly. He wants to teach you history. He wants you to understand Tom Riddle." Strange leaned in. "I don't care about Tom Riddle's history. I care about his annihilation. I am going to teach you how to fight. Not schoolyard dueling, not disarming charms. I am going to teach you how to survive a war." He paused, letting the weight of the promise hang in the air. "But understand this," Strange added, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This magic, the magic I use, it demands a cost. It isn't free. The bill always comes due." "I don't care about the cost," Harry said, his green eyes hard. "I just want him dead." Strange looked at the boy, really looked at him, and saw the fracture in Harry's own soul, the trauma that mirrored the villain he was destined to fight. "Be careful what you wish for," Harry, Strange said softly, "because I might just give it to you." London sleeping was a lie. The city never slept, it just muttered in its dreams. Stephen Strange hovered 30 feet above a red telephone booth in Whitehall. His physical body was invisible, suspended in a meditative trance within the cloak of levitation. His consciousness, however, had stripped itself of flesh and bone. His astral form, a translucent violet-hued projection of pure mind, drifted downward, passing through the pavement as if it were smoke. He descended into the Ministry of Magic. The wards here were impressive, designed to flay the skin off any wizard attempting to apparate inside. But walls meant nothing to a ghost. Strange bypassed the anti-intruder jinxes and drifted through the atrium, noting the golden fountain where magical brethren posed in a lie of harmony. He moved deeper, past the Horror Office, past the Department of Mysteries' black door. The air here changed. It grew cold, sterile. Strange drifted into a circular room with 12 doors. He moved through them methodically. He saw a room filled with floating brains, cognitive magic, crude but potent. He saw a bell jar where a hummingbird hatched and died in an endless loop, time manipulation weaponized. Then he found the death chamber. It was a vast stone amphitheater lit by low, flickering torches. In the center, on a raised dais, stood a jagged stone archway. Hanging within it was a tattered black veil that fluttered in a breeze that did not exist. Strange's astral form recoiled. This wasn't a portal. It wasn't a dimensional gateway like the ones he'd conjured. He drifted closer, the whispers hitting his mind like needles, thousands of voices. The dead. This was a tear in the fabric of existence, a direct unshielded wound leading to the absolute end. It was death localized and hungry. Anyone who passes through that veil, Strange realized, the thought echoing in the silence of his own mind, isn't going to another dimension. They are ceasing to exist. It was insanity to keep this in a government basement. It was like storing a black hole in a filing cabinet. He moved on, shaken. He found the Hall of Prophecy next, towering shelves stretching into the dark, holding millions of glass orbs. He sensed the binding magic here, destiny calcified into glass. He found the shelf marked Harry Potter and the Dark Lord. The orb pulsed with a sickly, inevitable heat. Neither can live while the other survives. Strange hovered there, staring at the dusty glass ball. In his world, he had used the time stone to view 14 million futures. He understood causality, but this was different. This was a narrative shackle. This universe didn't just have cause and effect. It had a script. And Harry Potter was the tragic lead. 2 hours later, the dining room of number 12 Grimald Place was a pressure cooker of tension. The Order of the Phoenix had assembled. It was a motley crew of exhaustion and nerves. Sirius Black, looking like a man haunted by his own house, paced the corner. Remus Lupin sat quietly, his eyes amber and alert. Mad-Eye Moody's magical eye spun wildly, trying to look through the back of Strange's skull. Hermione sat at the far end of the table, flanked by Harry and Ron. They hadn't been invited, but Strange had simply left the door open and looked at Molly Weasley with an expression that dared her to object. She hadn't. "Dr. Strange has conducted reconnaissance," Dumbledore said, from the head of the table. "He has confirmed our worst fears regarding the soul fragments." Strange stood. He waved a hand over the scarred table. Golden light erupted, weaving itself into a three-dimensional map of Great Britain. It was incredibly detailed, humming with a low magical resonance. For those who slept through Metaphysics 1001, Strange said, his voice dry, "A Horcrux is an abomination. It anchors a soul to the mortal plane. As long as one exists, the owner cannot die. He flicked his fingers. 8 points of purple light flared on the map. 8. Sirius Black breathed, stopping his pacing. That's insane. 1 splits the soul. But 8. He shredded himself, Strange said. He is less a man now than a collection of malignant tumors. Strange pointed to the lights, ticking them off with clinical detachment. Location 1, Hogwarts. Ravenclaw's diadem. We have it marked. Location 2, a shack in the north. Ancestral magic. Heavy decay. Location 3, underground. High security. Gringotts Bank. Location 4, a sea cave. Surrounded by inferi reanimated corpses. Location 5, a manor house in Wiltshire. The Malfoys. He paused at the last 2 lights. They were flickering. 6 and 7 are harder to read, Strange admitted, but the 8th... He pointed to a light that was slowly crawling across the map of Britain. It moves, Strange said. Moves, Severus. Snape spoke from the shadows, his voice a silken sneer. Horcruxes are inanimate objects, Doctor. They do not go for strolls. This one does, Strange countered, meeting Snape's black eyes. Because it's alive. It's the snake, Nagini. The room went dead silent. A living Horcrux. Lupin whispered, horror dawning on his face. If the snake dies... The soul fragment dies, Strange finished. But the snake is constantly with him. You can't steal it. You can't hide it. To destroy the 8th piece, you have to go through Voldemort himself. Hermione stared at the map. The logic of it was terrifying. It wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was a tactical nightmare. How do we destroy them? Kingsley Shacklebolt asked, his deep voice rumbling. Surely they are protected against standard magic. They are, Dumbledore said. We need substance capable of destroying a Horcrux beyond magical repair. Basilisk venom is one such substance. And where Molly Weasley asked, her voice trembling, are we supposed to get basilisk venom? Hermione looked at Harry. Harry looked at Hermione. It was a silent conversation they had perfected over 5 years of near-death experiences. The chamber. The Chamber of Secrets, Hermione said. Her voice was small, but it cut through the room. Every adult head swiveled toward her. The basilisk Harry killed in 2nd year, she continued, her confidence growing as the logic took hold. It's still down there. Basilisks don't decompose like normal creatures. The venom in the fangs, it would still be potent. Absolutely not, Molly snapped. You are children. You are not going back into that. I can open it, Harry interrupted. He stood up, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. I'm the only one who can. It needs parcel tongue. Harry, no Sirius, started stepping forward. It's my prophecy, Harry shouted. The raw anger in his voice silenced the room. You're talking about my life, my death. I'm tired of sitting upstairs while you decide my future. If I can get the venom, I'm getting it. Dumbledore looked weary. He opened his mouth, likely to offer a compromise, but Strange spoke first. He's right. Strange moved from behind the map, standing next to Harry. The visual was striking, the Sorcerer Supreme and the boy who lived. You can't coddle him anymore. Strange said to the room. The prophecy has marked him. Voldemort is hunting him. You can either train him to survive, or you can wrap him in wool and watch him die when the wolf comes. He looked at Molly, then at Sirius. He gets the venom. I'll go with him to ensure safety. But he does it. He takes the action. He reclaims the agency. Dumbledore sighed a long, rattling sound. Very well. Harry will secure the venom, but we must be cautious. As soon as a Horcrux is destroyed, Voldemort may sense it. Then we strike hard, Strange said. We build an arsenal, we map the targets. And when we move all at once. And in the meantime, Snape sneered. I suppose the great Sorcerer Supreme will continue teaching teenagers to disrespect authority. I'll continue teaching them to stay alive, Strange said coldly, which is more than you've done, Professor. The meeting dissolved into frantic planning. Maps were drawn, rosters assigned. But Hermione stayed in her seat, watching Strange. She walked over to him as the others argued about guard duty. You didn't tell them everything, she said quietly. Strange looked down at her. His expression was unreadable. What makes you say that? The map, Hermione said, pointing to the golden illusion still shimmering in the air. You showed 8 lights, but when you listed them, you skipped one. Strange's eyes narrowed. He looked at the map. There were the 7 locations he had named. And there, pulsing faintly right where they stood in London, was an 8th light. Wait. Hermione frowned. The light wasn't just in London. It was in the room. She looked around. The only things in the room were the Order members and Harry. She looked back at Strange, her blood running cold. Strange saw the realization hit her. He saw the terrifying logic click into place behind her eyes. He stepped closer, his voice a whisper that only she could hear. You are a very clever witch, Miss Granger. It's Harry, she breathed. Isn't it the accidental one, the scar? Strange didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. The silence was the answer. Does Dumbledore know? She asked, tears springing to her eyes. Yes. Does Harry? No. Hermione looked at her best friend, who was currently arguing with Sirius about the best way to harvest venom. He looked animated, alive. If he's a Horcrux, Hermione whispered, her voice shaking, then for Voldemort to die. Harry has to die, Strange finished. Hermione stared at him. You can't let that happen. You're a doctor. You save lives. I save reality, Strange said. Sometimes the cost of reality is high. Find another way, Hermione hissed, grabbing Strange's sleeve. You do magic that breaks the rules. Break this one. Strange looked at her hand on his arm, then at her fierce, terrified face. He remembered the Ancient One. He remembered the snow falling in the astral plane. Death is what gives life meaning. I'm looking, Strange said softly, but Hermione, prepare yourself. Logic dictates that 1 minus 1 equals 0. Sometimes there is no other way to balance the equation. He pulled his arm away and walked toward Dumbledore, leaving Hermione standing alone with the most terrible variable she had ever encountered. 3 days later, the war arrived in a classroom. Harry Potter screamed. It was a raw, jagged sound that cut through the murmur of the DA practice session. He collapsed to the stone floor of the room of requirement, clutching his forehead, his body thrashing as if invisible hooks were tearing him apart. Strange was there instantly. The cloak of levitation detached from his shoulders and slid under Harry's head, cushioning a convulsion that would have cracked his skull. Everyone out, Strange commanded. The air pressure in the room dropped, forcing the terrified students toward the door. Hermione, Ron, stay. Guard the door. Hermione slammed the heavy oak door shut and spun around. Strange was kneeling over Harry, his hands hovering inches from the boy's face. Golden mandalas spun around his wrists, scanning. It's him, Harry gasped, his eyes rolling back, showing the whites. Sirius. He's got Sirius. Department of Mysteries torturing him. Stabilize your mind, Strange ordered. Build the fortress, Harry, like we practiced. I can't, Harry shouted. I can see it. He's dying. Strange's eyes narrowed. He looked at Hermione. The connection is wide open. Voldemort is broadcasting this. It's a vision, a trap. It doesn't matter, Harry scrambled up, swaying dangerously. I saw him. Row 97. If I don't go, he dies. He's the only family I have left. Strange stood. He looked at the boy, sweating, shaking, terrified, but utterly resolved. He saw the same look he had seen in the mirror 1,000 times. The refusal to accept the acceptable loss. If you go alone, you die, Strange said bluntly, and Sirius dies anyway. Then I won't go alone, Harry said, looking at Ron and Hermione. They stepped forward, wands drawn. Neville, Ginny, and Luna emerged from the shadows near the door they hadn't left. We're coming too, Neville said, his voice trembling but his chin set. Strange calculated. 6 teenagers against a squad of Death Eaters. Survival probability 0. He sighed. Fine, Strange said. He raised his hand, and the air in front of them ripped open. A sparking circular portal revealed the dark, rain-slicked alleyway in London. If we're walking into a trap, we're doing it on my terms. The Department of Mysteries was a tomb. Strange led the group through the circular room, his astral senses pushing out ahead of them like sonar. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It felt like the building was holding its breath. This way, Harry whispered, pointing to a black door. I feel it. They entered the Hall of Prophecy. It was a cathedral of glass. Towering shelves stretched up into the darkness, lined with thousands of glowing dusty orbs. The air hummed with the whispers of 1,000,000 possible futures. Strange floated slightly above the floor, the cloak silent. He felt the trap before he saw it. The shadows between the shelves were too dense. The silence was too deliberate. Harry ran ahead to row 97. He stopped. He's not here, Harry whispered, staring at the empty floor where he had seen Sirius bleeding. He was right here. Hermione scanned the shelf. Harry, she breathed. This one. It has your name on it. Harry reached out. His fingers brushed the cold glass of a prophecy orb. Click! The sound was mechanical, final, like the tumbler of a lock sliding into place. Very good, Potter, a drawling voice echoed from the darkness. Light exploded from the shadows as 12 black-robed figures materialized surrounding them. Lucius Malfoy stepped into the light. His wand raised, his pale face twisted in a sneer. Now, Malfoy said smoothly, hand over the prophecy like a good boy, and we might let your little friends die quickly. Strange dropped from the air, landing softly between the students and the Death Eaters. I have a counter-proposal, Strange said. His voice was calm, conversational. You leave now, and I don't break your minds. Malfoy laughed. The foreign wizard. You have no wand, sir. You are outmatched. Am I? Strange slammed his palms together. Clang! The sound was like a temple bell. The reality of the Hall of Prophecy shattered. The floor became the ceiling. The shelves folded inward like an accordion. Strange twisted his hands, and the mirror dimension crashed over them. Run, Strange shouted to the students. The world turned kaleidoscopic. Death Eaters fired killing curses, but the green jets of light curved harmlessly around Strange, following the warped gravity he now controlled. He pulled the floor out from under Bellatrix Lestrange, sending her tumbling through an infinite loop of shelving. He held the line, 1 man against 12, but he couldn't hold the geometry forever. Go to the door, Strange yelled, opening a portal that dumped the students back into the circular antechamber. The battle spilled into the death chamber. It was chaos. The Order of the Phoenix had arrived. Sirius, Lupin, Tonks, Moody, Kingsley, bursting through the doors in a blaze of spellfire. Strange stood on the stone tiers of the amphitheater, deflecting curses with mandalas of hard light. He watched the Order fight. They were brave. They were skilled. But they were human. Below, near the dais, Sirius Black was dueling Bellatrix Lestrange. He was laughing. He was brilliant and reckless, taunting his cousin as he dodged her jets of red light. "Come on, you can do better than that," Sirius roared. Strange saw it happen before it happened. He saw Bellatrix's face twist into a rictus of hate. He saw her wand movement shift, not a killing curse, but a heavy concussive stunner. He saw Sirius's foot placement. He was too close to the edge, too close to the veil. No, the spell hit Sirius square in the chest. The laugh froze on Sirius's face. His eyes went wide with shock. He stumbled backward. 1 step. 2. He was falling. Behind him, the tattered black curtain of the veil fluttered hungrily. The whispers rose to a shriek. If he touched that veil, he was gone, not dead, erased, beyond the reach of magic, beyond resurrection. Strange's mind, honed by the time stone, processed the variables in a microsecond. Variable 1. Do nothing. Sirius falls through. Harry watches his godfather vanish. The grief breaks him, hardens him. It is the crucible the prophecy requires. It creates the soldier who will kill Voldemort. It is the correct timeline. Variable 2. Intervene. Save the man. Break the timeline. Risk a paradox. Dilute the lesson. The greater good. Dumbledore's voice echoed in his head. Acceptable losses. Strange looked at Harry. The boy was freezing, his mouth opening in a silent scream of absolute devastation. He looked like a child whose world was ending. Strange thought of his hands. He thought of the surgeons telling him it was impossible. He thought of the 14 million futures where he had let people die to save the universe. Not today. Strange reached into his tunic. He grabbed the eye of Agamotto. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask permission. He grabbed the fabric of time and yanked. Green light flooded the death chamber. The noise of battle, the screams, the explosions, the whispers vanished. Silence. Absolute terrifying silence. Sirius Black hung suspended in midair, leaning backward at a 45-degree angle. The hem of his robe was an inch from the veil. A spell, a jagged bolt of red light, was frozen against his chest, mushrooming out on impact, but not yet pushing him. Strange walked down the stone steps. His footsteps were the only sound in the universe. He walked past Bellatrix, her face a frozen mask of manic glee. He walked past Harry, a statue of heartbreak. He reached the dais. He looked at the veil. Up close, the ancient archway radiated a cold that seeped through his astral defenses. It was a mouth, and Strange was stealing its meal. "I am the master of the mystic arts," Strange whispered to the frozen void. "And I say, not yet." He didn't push Sirius. That would be crude. Instead, Strange twisted his wrist counterclockwise. The green rings of the time spell whirred. Rewind. Sirius's body unfell. He stood up. The red spell sucked itself back into Bellatrix's wand. The laugh returned to his face, then unhappened. 10 seconds. That was all Strange took. He stopped the rewind. Then he cheated. In the frozen second before time resumed, Strange opened a portal directly beneath Sirius's feet. and another one 20 feet away, safely behind a stone pillar. He dropped his hand. The green light vanished. "Play. Come on. You can do better than Sirius," shouted, stepping back. His foot found empty air. He fell through the portal. Bellatrix screamed, "Stupefy!" The red jet of light hit the empty space where Sirius had been a millisecond before. It passed harmlessly through the air and struck the stone archway, sizzling out. Sirius tumbled out of the exit portal, landing in a heap next to Remus Lupin. He blinked, looking around wildly. "What the—" Harry, who had been screaming, choked on his own breath. Sirius. Strange stood on the dais, his chest heaving. The eye of Agamotto burned against his skin, hot as a coal. The universe groaned. He felt it, a deep tectonic shudder in the fabric of reality. The timeline had snapped. A death had been stolen. "The bill comes due. Dr. Strange," Harry yelled, pointing. Strange spun around. He was too slow. The time manipulation had drained him. His shields were a fraction of a second late. A curse from a masked Death Eater Dolohov shattered Strange's hastily formed mandala. The purple flame slashed across Strange's chest, burning through the tunic's searing skin. Strange stumbled, falling to one knee. The pain was blinding. And then the air pressure in the room multiplied by 10. The torches flickered and died. A sound like tearing canvas filled the chamber. From the black smoke coalescing in the center of the room, a figure emerged, pale as bone, eyes like coagulated blood. Voldemort had arrived. He looked at the scene, his Death Eaters scrambling the order, regrouping Sirius Black alive and confused. Then his red eyes locked onto the man kneeling on the dais. The foreign wizard Voldemort hissed, his voice high and cold, vibrating in Strange's teeth. "You reek of time." Strange forced himself to stand, clutching his bleeding chest. "And you," Strange rasped, golden sparks flickering weakly at his fingertips, reek of fear. The death chamber did not simply witness a duel, it survived an apocalypse. To Hermione Granger, huddled behind a crumbled stone pillar with Harry and Ron, the magic she was witnessing bore no resemblance to the structured Latin-based incantations of the classroom. This was not dueling, this was not sport. This was a conversation between gods, written in the language of violence. Voldemort moved like smoke in a gale. He didn't just cast spells, he threw death. A slash of his U-wand sent a wave of darkness that rotted the stone floor upon contact, turning solid rock into black sludge that hissed and bubbled. "You are not of this world," Voldemort shrieked, his voice piercing the thunder of collapsing masonry. "You reek of other places." Strange, kneeling and clutching his bleeding chest, didn't answer with words. He answered with geometry. As a killing curse, a jagged bolt of green lightning screamed toward him. Strange didn't block it. He couldn't. Avada Kedavra was unblockable by standard magical shields. Instead, Strange punched the air. A shard of the mirror dimension unfolded like a fan of crystalline glass. The killing curse hit the faceted surface and refracted, splitting into a dozen harmless beams of green light that scattered into the ceiling. "Impossible," Bellatrix breathed, watching from the steps. Strange stood up, his face gray with pain. The purple slash across his chest was smoking the dark magic of Dolohov's curse, trying to eat its way to his heart. "I have bargained with Dormammu." Strange gritted out, blood staining his teeth. "I have held the fabric of reality against distinct universal collapse. You are just a man with a snake." Voldemort hissed a sound of pure animal rage. He raised his wand, and the shadows in the rooms animated. They detached from the walls, transforming into towering serpentine forms of black fire, fiend fire. The heat was instantaneous and blistering. The fire snakes lunged their maws wide enough to swallow a car. Strange couldn't teleport them all. He was too weak. The time stone usage had drained his reserves to the dregs. Dr. Hermione screamed, raising her own wand in a futile gesture of defense. Strange's hands moved, trembling. He formed a shield, not the complex mandalas of earlier, but a raw, desperate dome of orange energy. The fire slammed into it. The shield cracked. Strange groaned his knees, buckling under the weight of the Dark Lord's hate. "You are powerful," Voldemort taunted, walking closer, the fire swirling around him like a pet. "But you are weak. You protect. You save. You lack the will to do what is necessary." "I've ended threats before," Strange gasped, sweat dripping into his eyes. "Then end me," Voldemort roared. "Show me your death." Strange looked up, his eyes burning with a fierce, cold intelligence locked onto Voldemort's red slits. "I don't need to kill you," Strange whispered. "I just need to solve you." He dropped the shield. Voldemort paused, confused by the surrender. "I know," Strange said, his voice cutting through the roar of the fire. "The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, the snake, and the boy." Voldemort froze. The fire snakes halted in midair. The arrogance on his serpentine face vanished, replaced by a look of absolute, terrified shock. "You know," Voldemort whispered. "I know everything," Strange confirmed. "I see the threads. I see the anchors. Your immortality is a lie, Tom, and I am going to pick you apart piece by piece." The silence that followed was heavier than the battle. In that moment, Voldemort realized he wasn't fighting a soldier. He was fighting a surgeon who had already found the tumor. "Kill him!" Voldemort screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill him now!" He unleashed a wave of pure magic, not a spell, just raw, destructive intent. It was a tsunami of green and black energy that filled the room. Strange crossed his wrists. "This is it," he thought. "The bill comes due." Then the room turned white. A flash of fire, brilliant, cleansing, red and gold, erupted in the center of the chamber. A song pure and unearthly pierced the roar of the dark magic. Fawkes the Phoenix circled overhead, and from the flames Albus Dumbledore stepped out. The headmaster did not look like a kindly old man. He looked like an Old Testament wrath. His wand was a blur. He caught Voldemort's wave of death on the tip of his wand and spun it, transforming the black energy into a flock of silver moths that dispersed into the air. "Tom Dumbledore," said. His voice wasn't loud, but it drowned out everything else. "This ends now." Dumbledore Voldemort spat, turning his fury on his old teacher. The duel that followed was legendary. Fire met water, shadow met light. Dumbledore encased Voldemort in a sphere of water. Voldemort turned it into black glass and shattered it. The sheer concussive force of their clash knocked the students off their feet. Strange didn't watch. He moved. He dragged himself toward the students. "Group up," he shouted over the noise. "Now touch the person next to you." Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, Ginny. They grabbed hands, forming a terrified chain. Harry, Strange said, gripping the boy's shoulder with a blood-slicked hand. "You did it. You saved him." Harry looked past Strange. Sirius Black was fighting alongside Remus Lupin, a live hole, and currently blasting a Death Eater off the dais. "He's alive!" Harry sobbed, the relief buckling his knees. "Hold that feeling," Strange commanded. "We're leaving." He began to spin his hand. The portal sputtered. The sparks were weak, flickering and dying. He didn't have the energy to punch a hole in space. Dr. Hermione asked, seeing his hand shake. Strange gritted his teeth. He grabbed the eye of Agamotto again. Not for time, for power. He drew on the ambient background radiation of the ley lines, forcing his body to act as a conduit for energy he shouldn't be channeling in this state. He screamed in pain as the magic seared his already damaged nerves. The portal ripped open, not to London, to the Hogwarts infirmary. "Go!" Strange roared. He shoved the students through. As Harry passed, he tried to grab Strange's arm. "You're coming too." "I have to cover the retreat," Strange lied. He pushed Harry through. Strange turned back to the battle. The Order was falling back. Dumbledore was holding Voldemort at bay, but the effort was costing him. The Ministry atrium elevators chimed. Cornelius Fudge, in his lime-green bowler hat, stepped out, followed by a squad of Aurors. He stopped, his mouth falling open as he saw the Dark Lord in the flesh. The secret was out. The war was official. Voldemort saw the Ministry officials. He saw Dumbledore. He saw Strange, bleeding but standing. He screamed in frustration, a sound of pure, impotent hate, and swept his cloak around himself. With a crack like a gunshot, he disapparated, taking Bellatrix with him. Silence rushed back into the room, broken only by the whimpering of Cornelius Fudge. Strange looked at Dumbledore. The headmaster lowered his wand. He looked old. Strange tried to nod. The room tilted sideways. The stone floor rushed up to meet him. Darkness took him before he hit the ground. The hospital wing smelled of antiseptic and scale agro. Hermione sat in a chair next to the bed, watching the slow rise and fall of Dr. Strange's chest. He was pale, the gray streaks in his hair seeming more pronounced against the white pillow. His chest was wrapped in thick bandages, the purple curse damage slowly fading under Madame Pomfrey's aggressive treatment. It had been 6 hours since the battle. The castle was quiet, but it was a tense, vibrating quiet. The Daily Prophet had already released a special evening edition, "He Who Must Not Be Named Returns." Fudge resigns. Dumbledore vindicated. But Hermione wasn't thinking about politics. She was thinking about physics. She was thinking about the way Sirius Black had fallen, the angle, the velocity, the inevitability of gravity, and then the glitch, the rewind, the impossible save. Strange stirred. His eyes opened, not groggy, but instantly alert. He flinched his hand, going immediately to his chest, then to his neck, to check for the eye. "It's there," Hermione said softly. "Madame Pomfrey tried to take it off to clean you up. It burned her fingers." Strange relaxed slightly. "Defensive enchantment, sorry about that." "You died," Hermione said, "clinically, for about a minute when they brought you in. Madame Pomfrey said your heart stopped." "Occupational hazard," Strange rasped. He tried to sit up, winced, and settled for propping himself on his elbows. The others. "Harry is sleeping. Madame Pomfrey gave him dreamless sleep potion. Sirius is sitting by his bed. He won't leave him." Hermione's voice trembled. "He's alive, Doctor. Sirius is alive." "Yes," Strange said, staring at the ceiling. "He is. But he shouldn't be." Strange looked at her. "I saw it," Hermione whispered. "I saw the spell hit him. I saw him fall. And then the world skipped like a scratch on a record. You changed it." "I made a choice," Strange said. "You used a time turner. Something stronger. The doors to the hospital wing opened. Albus Dumbledore swept in. He looked weary, his robe singed at the hem, but his presence was as commanding as ever. Miss Granger Dumbledore said gently, "Might I have a moment with the doctor?" Hermione looked from Dumbledore to Strange. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Professor, Doctor." She walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back to Strange. "Thank you," she said, "for breaking the rules." She left. Dumbledore conjured a chintz armchair and sat down heavily beside the bed. He peered at Strange over his half-moon spectacles. "The Ministry is in chaos," Dumbledore reported. "The war has formally begun, but we have won a significant victory tonight. The prophecy was not stolen, the Death Eaters were repelled, and miraculously we suffered no casualties." "Miraculously," Strange echoed dryly. "You used the stone," Dumbledore stated. Strange met his gaze. "I did." "You calculated the cost." "I always calculate the cost." Dumbledore sighed. Sirius Black's death, it was a fulcrum point. I had foreseen it as a possibility. A tragedy, yes, but one that would have hardened Harry, severed his last tie to childhood, forced him to confront the reality of his destiny. "I know," Strange said. "I saw the timeline where he died. Harry becomes a soldier, ruthless, efficient. He hunts the Horcruxes with a cold heart. He wins the war." "And yet," Dumbledore's eyes narrowed, "you rewrote it." "Because a soldier isn't what you need," Strange said, his voice gaining strength. "You need a human. Harry's power, the power the Dark Lord knows not, is love. You told me that yourself. How does he maintain the capacity for love? If we let him watch his family die one by one, if we strip mine his soul for the sake of victory." "It is a dangerous gamble," Dumbledore said. "To save one life, you may have doomed us all. The timeline is fragile. Ripples spread." "Let them spread," Strange snapped. "I'm tired of trading lives, Albus. I'm tired of the arithmetic of sacrifice. In my world, I viewed 14 million futures to find the one where we won, and it required terrible things." He looked at his shaking hands. "But this isn't my prophecy. This isn't my script. I refuse to let a 15-year-old boy lose his father figure just to build character." Dumbledore watched him for a long time. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant hooting of an owl. "You are a stubborn man, Stephen Strange," Dumbledore said finally. There was no anger in his voice, only a strange, sad respect. "I'm the Sorcerer Supreme," Strange replied. "Stubborn is in the job description." "Very well," Dumbledore stood up. "Sirius Black lives. Harry Potter retains his heart, and Voldemort knows that we know his secret. The board has changed completely." "Good," Strange said. "I prefer a fair fight." "There is one more thing," Dumbledore said, his hand on the doorframe. "You told Voldemort you knew everything. The diary, the ring, the boy." Strange went still. "He knows now," Dumbledore said, his voice grave. "He knows his soul is in Harry. He will not try to kill the boy anymore, Doctor. He will try to capture him. He will try to absorb him." "Then we protect him," Strange said. "And the 8th Horcrux," Dumbledore asked. "The one inside Harry. How do we destroy the parasite without killing the host?" "I'm working on it," Strange lied. "Work faster," Dumbledore said, "because the timeline you saved, it may not have a happy ending." He swept out of the room, leaving Strange alone in the dark. Strange lay back against the pillows. He closed his eyes and let his astral form drift upward, hovering near the ceiling. He looked down at his broken body. He had lied to Hermione. He had lied to Dumbledore. He hadn't just rewound time. When he used the stone, he had looked forward. Just a glimpse. In the timeline where Sirius lived, the war didn't end in a duel. It ended in fire. Strange opened his physical eyes, staring into the dark. One problem at a time, he whispered to the empty room. The war didn't wait for winter. It arrived with the falling leaves. Hogwarts had ceased to be a school in the traditional sense. Under the dual stewardship of Albus Dumbledore and Stephen Strange, it had become a fortress. The Great Hall was no longer just for dining. It was a tactical command center where Order members mapped Death Eater movements on enchanted parchment. The library was a research division, and the room of requirement was a boot camp. Hermione Granger stood on a floating platform of hard light, watching 30 students move in perfect unison. "Shields up," Neville Longbottom shouted. 30 wands slashed upward, but they didn't cast Protego. They cast the geometric honeycombed barriers Strange had taught them, eldritch shields that didn't just block spells, but absorbed their kinetic energy. "Portal drill," Ginny Weasley commanded. The students paired off. As one fired a stunning spell, the other didn't dodge. They slashed a circle in the air. A small, sparkling gateway opened, swallowing the red light and spitting it out from a secondary portal behind the attacker. It was breathtaking. It was terrifying. They were children weaponizing physics. Strange floated in the center of the room. His arms crossed the cloak of levitation, draping him like a general's coat. He looked exhausted. He always looked exhausted these days, but his eyes were sharp. "Better," Strange called out. "But you're still thinking like wizards. You're waiting for the incantation. Stop listening. Look. Feel the intent before the word is spoken." Hermione dropped off the platform landing beside him. "The diadem is ready," she said quietly. Strange's expression tightened. "Is Harry prepared?" "He has the venom." They gathered in the Chamber of Secrets. It was the only place secure enough to contain the magical backlash. The damp, echoing cavern smelled of dead snakes and stagnant water. The carcass of the basilisk lay where Harry had left it 3 years ago, preserved by the chamber's cold magic. Strange stood before a stone altar he had conjured. On it sat the lost diadem of Ravenclaw. It was beautiful, tarnished silver and sapphires, but to Hermione's new senses, honed by Strange's training, it looked like a bleeding wound. Black tar-like smoke seeped from the jewels. "This is the first domino," Strange said, his voice echoing off the serpentine statues. "Once this breaks, he knows. The connection opens. The war goes hot." Harry stood holding a basilisk fang. He looked older than 15. He looked steady. Sirius stood behind him, a living ghost of a timeline that shouldn't exist, his hand resting on Harry's shoulder. "Do it," Harry Sirius whispered. Harry stepped forward. He didn't hesitate. He drove the fang down. The diadem screamed. It wasn't a metallic crunch. It was a human shriek of agony that tore at their eardrums. A cloud of black smoke erupted from the tiara, forming the twisted, screaming face of Voldemort. It lunged at Harry. Strange flicked his wrist. A whip of orange energy lashed out, catching the smoke entity by the throat. "Not today," Strange growled. He yanked the whip. The smoke shattered. The diadem cracked down the middle, oozing a thick black substance that sizzled on the stone. The scream died. Silence returned to the chamber. Harry dropped the fang, clutching his scar. He felt it. Harry gasped, his face pale. He's angry. He's scared." Good, Strange said. Fear makes him predictable. He's moving them, Harry continued, eyes squeezed shut. The cup, the locket. He's summoning them. He's bringing them to him. Bringing them where? Dumbledore asked, stepping out of the shadows. Harry opened his eyes. They were green and hard. Home, Harry said. He's bringing them to Malfoy Manor, all of them. The weeks that followed were a blur of high-stakes improvisation. With the Horcruxes converging in one fortress, the hunt had changed. It was no longer a search, it was a siege. But before they could attack Malfoy Manor, Strange had one final problem to solve. The 8th Horcrux, the boy. Hermione found Strange in the library's restricted section. He had turned a corner of the dusty room into a surgical theater of floating books. Tomes from Camartage floated alongside secrets of the darkest art. "You're not sleeping," Hermione said, placing a mug of tea on a table that was currently walking on its own legs. "Sleep is for people who aren't trying to rewrite metaphysics." Strange muttered without looking up. He was staring at a complex diagram of a human soul overlaid with a fungal infection. "Have you found it?" Hermione asked. "The way to save him?" Strange sighed and waved his hand. The books closed and stacked themselves. "The problem," Strange said, rubbing his temples, "is that the soul fragment isn't just attached to Harry. It's fused. It's like trying to remove milk from tea after you've stirred it." "But you're the Sorcerer Supreme," Hermione challenged. "You don't accept impossible." "I don't," Strange agreed, "which is why I'm not looking for a separation spell. I'm looking for a transfer." He spun the diagram. "I can't cut the piece out without killing the host. But if the piece wanted to leave, if it was drawn to something else, something more attractive than a 15-year-old boy." Hermione frowned. "Like what, another Horcrux?" "No," Strange said. "Something empty, something compatible." He looked at her and his eyes held a terrifying manic energy. "The mirror dimension," Strange said. "It reflects reality. It copies it. If I create a reflection of Harry, a construct of pure energy within the mirror dimension, and we bait the soul fragment." "You want to trick a piece of Voldemort's soul into jumping into a mirror," Hermione summarized skeptically. "I want to perform a spiritual transplant using a dimensional scalpel," Strange corrected. "It requires surgical precision. It requires Harry to lower his mental shields completely while Voldemort is actively trying to possess him. And it requires me to hold the dimension open while Dumbledore extracts the parasite." "It sounds insane," Hermione said. "It is." Strange smiled thinly. "That's why it's going to work." Suddenly the castle shook. Dust rained down from the library ceiling. A deep, booming sound rolled across the grounds like thunder trapped in a valley. Strange was at the window in an instant. "What is it?" Hermione asked, rushing to his side. Strange looked down at the grounds. The sun was setting, painting the Scottish hills in blood red. But the darkness gathering at the edge of the forbidden forest wasn't natural. Thousands of figures stood at the boundary line, giants, acromantulas, werewolves, and in front of them row upon row of masked wizards. "He didn't wait for us to come to the manor," Strange whispered. "Voldemort had brought the war to them." "He knows we have the diadem," Strange said, his voice flat. "He knows Harry is here. He's done hiding." The castle's protective wards shivered. A high, cold voice, amplified by magic, boomed across the grounds, penetrating the stone walls, echoing in every corridor, every classroom, every dormitory. Harry Potter, Voldemort's voice hissed. "I know you are there. I know your friends hide you. I have come to offer you a choice." Strange turned from the window. The cloak of levitation settled onto his shoulders, the clasps snapping shut with a metallic finality. "Surrender yourself by midnight," the voice continued, "and your friends will be spared. Refuse, and I will burn this castle to the ground and pick the bones of your defenders from the ashes." Hermione looked at Strange. She was shaking. This was it. The theory was over. "He brought the snake," Strange said, his eyes distant. "He brought the other Horcruxes. He thinks he's bringing his treasury with him for safekeeping." "He brought them into our trap," Hermione realized. "Or he brought us into his grave," Strange said. He walked past her, his boots clicking on the stone. "Gather the DA, Miss Granger. Tell Dumbledore to activate the statues. It's time to see if your homework pays off." "Where are you going?" Hermione called after him. Strange paused at the door. He touched the eye of Agamotto. "I'm going to break the siege," Strange said, "and then I'm going to perform surgery on a god." Midnight did not arrive with a tolling bell. It arrived with the sound of 1,000 protective wards shattering at once. The sky above Hogwarts turned the color of a bruise. The golden dome of Dumbledore's protection dissolved under the assault of the Elder Wand, raining down like glittering ash. Hermione Granger stood in the courtyard, her wand raised her heart, hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Around her the DA stood in formation, not lines of terrified children, but a phalanx of soldiers trained by a Sorcerer Supreme. "Hold," Neville shouted, his grip on his wand white-knuckled. The stone bridge connecting the castle to the grounds was a choke point. A wave of snatchers and giants surged forward, a roaring tide of flesh and dark magic. Then Stephen Strange stepped onto the bridge. He didn't run. He walked. His cloak billowed in a wind that smelled of ozone and ancient dust. He stopped 10 yards from the charging horde. "You are trespassing," Strange said. His voice wasn't loud, but it resonated in the marrow of everyone present. A giant roared and swung a club the size of a tree trunk. Strange crossed his wrists. The eye of Agamotto opened wide, blindingly green. Images of Econ. Strange didn't just multiply. He fractured the light. Suddenly, there wasn't one Sorcerer Supreme. There were 100, 1,000. They lined the bridge, the battlements, the sky. A legion of illusions, each one glowing with eldritch fire. The giants faltered, confused by the army that had materialized from thin air. "Fire," Neville commanded. The DA didn't cast stunning spells. They cast portals. Dozens of sparkling rings opened beneath the feet of the charging giants. The monsters fell through their screams, cutting off as they were deposited 5,000 feet above the Black Lake. It was chaos. It was physics weaponized. But the center of the storm was silent. Voldemort glided across the bridge, ignoring the illusions, his red eyes fixed on Harry, who stood behind Strange. Nagini slithered at his master's heels, the final moving Horcrux. "You hide behind tricks," Voldemort hissed, raising the Elder Wand. "You hide behind children." "I hide nothing," Strange replied, dropping the illusions. He stood alone again, panting, sweat slicking his hair. Using the images of Icon in this dimension was draining him rapidly. "Harry is right here. Come and get him." Voldemort smiled a rictus of skeletal delight. Avada Kedavra. The green light rushed toward Harry. Harry didn't dodge. He didn't cast Expelliarmus. He dropped his mental shields. Now Strange roared. Harry stepped into the path of the curse, but not to die. As the green light hit, Strange slammed his palms together. The mirror dimension exploded outward, not as a wall, but as a trap. It swallowed Harry and Voldemort, instantly turning the courtyard into a kaleidoscope of fracturing glass. Inside the mirror dimension, gravity was a suggestion. Harry and Voldemort stood on a ceiling of twisted stone. "You cannot kill me," Voldemort screamed, unleashing a storm of dark magic. "I am eternal." "You are a parasite," Harry yelled back. He closed his eyes. He didn't fight the connection. He pushed into it. He shoved his own love, his grief for his parents, his loyalty to Sirius, straight down the mental link. Voldemort recoiled, shrieking. Love to a soul so fractured was acid. "Get out of my head!" Voldemort thrashed, his form flickering. Dr. Harry screamed, "Pull it out!" Strange floated above them, his hands glowing with surgical white light. He saw it, the black, oily leech of the soul fragment, frantically trying to detach from Harry, to escape the burning purity of the boy's emotions. Strange didn't use a spell. He used a gesture of absolute will. He grabbed the reflection of the soul in the mirror reality, and he pulled. The scream that tore through the dimension shattered the glass sky. The black leech ripped free from Harry's scar, flailing in the air, a creature of smoke and hate. Neville Strange's voice boomed across the dimensions, heard in the real world through the thinning veil. In the real courtyard, Neville Longbottom saw the snake Nagini, hissing in confusion as her master flickered in and out of reality. Neville didn't hesitate. He drew the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat. With a single clean stroke, he took the snake's head off. The anchor snapped. Inside the mirror dimension, the smoke creature withered. Voldemort fell to his knees, clutching his chest. He was whole again, mortal, singular. Strange dropped the mirror dimension. Reality snapped back into place. Voldemort lay on the cobblestones, panting, his skin gray and papery. He looked up. There were no Horcruxes left, no diary, no ring, no locket, no cup, no diadem, no snake, no boy. Just Tom Riddle, a man who had forgotten that death was the one thing he couldn't outrun. Harry stood over him. He lowered his wand. "It's over," Harry said softly. Voldemort lunged, a desperate final clawing for power. Harry simply stepped aside. The Dark Lord fell face forward onto the stone. His body, sustained only by dark magic for so long, finally gave up. He didn't explode. He didn't vanish. He just stopped. A mundane human death. The sun rose over a castle that was battered but standing. Hermione found Strange on the astronomy tower, leaning heavily against the parapet. The cloak of levitation was draped over his arm, looking as tired as he was. "He's gone," Hermione said, "really gone." "The cancer is excised," Strange said, looking out at the forbidden forest. "The patient will survive." "Harry is different," Hermione admitted. "Lighter, like he put down a heavy backpack he's been carrying his whole life." "He has his life back," Strange said. "What he does with it is up to him." "And you?" Hermione asked. "What will you do?" Strange pushed himself off the wall. He winced. The burns on his chest from the Department of Mysteries were healing, but the toll of channeling this dimension's magic would scar him forever. "My work here is done. The instability is resolved. The timeline is mostly intact." "Mostly?" Strange smiled. "Sirius Black is alive. Remus Lupin is alive. Fred Weasley is alive. The timeline is fractured, Miss Granger, but I think I can live with the cracks." Dumbledore appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked 10 years younger, the weight of the war lifted from his shoulders. Leaving so soon, Stephen? The multiverse doesn't sleep, Albus Strange said, and I have a feeling I've violated about 50 laws of reality that I need to go apologize for. We owe you a debt we cannot repay, Dumbledore said, bowing his head. Just teach them better, Strange said, gesturing to the students below, who were repairing the castle walls with wandless levitation, a trick they had picked up from the DA sessions. Teach them that rules are good, but principles are better. Strange turned to Hermione. You were right, by the way, he said. About what? Logic, Strange said, opening a sparking portal that showed the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York. 1 minus 1 usually equals 0, but sometimes, if you cheat, it equals 2. He stepped into the portal. Mischief managed, Dr. Strange said, and then with a sound like tearing silk, he was gone. Hermione stood on the tower, the wind catching her hair. She looked down at her wand. It was just a piece of wood, a tool. She closed her eyes. She felt the wind. She felt the stone. She felt the hum of the castle, the ley lines, the infinite, terrifying, beautiful energy of the universe. She didn't need the book to tell her what it was anymore. She smiled, and for the first time in her life, she didn't analyze the feeling. She just let it be magic.